chilling tales for dark nights.
The Lady Upstairs by Tom and Sakinah Jonas-Mawji. Narrated by Otis Jiry. Dear Mr. Jennings, I'm writing to you because at this point I would like to believe my friend is still alive and you're someone who finds people for a living. I hear you won't take on a case without all the specifics, so I guess I should explain. I need to find a young woman named Amanda Moore. I've attached all the information I have about her, but it may well be the case she doesn't want to be found. Just hear me out before you go making any assumptions. I've never hurt or harassed this girl at all. I'm actually kind of worried about her, but no one will help me. Amanda, up until very recently, was a student at the University of Social Science, majoring in child psychology. She was the best in our year, easily, and in typical fashion, seemed to have little to no interest in anything other than study. She'd probably been taunted many times before for being a know-it-all, bookworm, and kiss-ass, so it figured she had no desire to socialize. The first time I saw her was at enrollment, reservedly waiting on a chair to be issued her ID. I think it's safe to say I had a thing for her from the start. She was attractive in that unforced, natural kind of way. Plus, she was a redhead, and my track record definitely proved that I had a thing for them. I knew I just had to talk to this girl. Unfortunately, this was easier said than done. I spent the whole first year just trying to strike up a single conversation with her. I'd always try to sit next to her in class or at lunch, casting a friendly glance her way, and she would perhaps allow me the nicety of a polite smile or a nod before returning to the textbook she was poring over. It always felt like she was appreciative of the company, even for just a second before she remembered herself and was isolated again in her safe bubble. The thought had occurred to me that maybe she just didn't enjoy my company, but when I realized the small nods and smiles she gave me were more than most people got at all, I resolved to reach out to her. I forget when exactly, but there was one day where, as I lined up to buy lunch, that I glanced over at her, and she looked a little shaken, perhaps even trembling slightly. I reckoned, perhaps, she'd been on the receiving end of some derogatory comment from one of the class's low achievers, angry at her deserved success. I won't lie to you about my motives. You were once my age, right? Of course, I saw this as my chance to comfort her, maybe even her open up a little bit to me. I told you already, I was a little smitten with Amanda. I made sure I picked up the candy bar I usually saw her choosing at lunch. The worst she could do is just refuse it. The best, maybe stop quivering long enough to realize I could be there for her. I walked over to her secluded corner of the cafeteria hall and sat across from her. I smiled reassuringly and planted the bar down in front of her. I hoped it conveyed to her what I intended it to. I'm here. You don't have to be alone. I watched in horror as her eyes began to well up, softening her pupils into beginnings of tears. Crap. It was going terribly wrong. I was the last thing she needed, an unrequited crush muscling in to take advantage of her emotional state. Of course, this was a terrible idea. I cursed at myself in my head and began to stand up to leave. It was then her small, timid voice spoke out to me for the first time. It was compassionate and soft. Perfect for a child psychologist, I thought. It struck me as bizarre that I had never heard it until then. She simply said, "No, please, stay." A whole year spent chasing those 3 words. Oddly, it seemed worth it. I looked at her and her eyes met mine. "Sure," I replied. I was at a loss for words, but thankfully that didn't matter. It was Amanda who was talking, and I could finally listen to her. by the sound of it, she'd had a difficult morning. Part of our course involved working locally with real cases alongside other professionals in order to gain experience, and Amanda had been leading sessions with a little girl she referred to as Miss K. It was nothing personal, just confidentiality that dictated the alias, and we didn't like using numbers. It was too impersonal. Miss K was experiencing delusions and psychosis. Pretty heavy stuff, but again, Amanda was the best in our year. I expect she may well have offered to take such a difficult patient on. Her academic career was exemplary, after all, so it made sense she'd maybe sought after a difficult assignment. Amanda told me all she could about Miss K, that the girl was close to 8 years old and lived in an impoverished area of town, 12 floors up. Kay's parents couldn't get a word of sense out of their kid, and she was tearing up her room nightly, screaming at the top of her lungs. Recently, she'd taken to pulling big chunks out of animal plushies and clawing at wallpaper with her fingernails, too. At the end of their tether, they thought therapy was the only option left to them. Through the first few sessions, Amanda had ticked off the basics. No serious past traumas that could be responsible, no episodes prior to the current ongoing ones. She had done everything methodically and come up with nothing, save for a few suspicions about an upstairs neighbor who the girl often mentioned, and perhaps the temperature in Kay's room fluctuating at night as the girl complained in her ramblings about mold on the walls. It was this morning that Amanda had finally coaxed a somewhat coherent and detailed description from Miss K of the terrors she was experiencing at night. Amanda admitted to me that she'd been hesitant of hearing the full details of the dream. The girl had been clawing things to pieces because of them, but she felt that confronting the nightmares that seemed to flood the girl with fear was the only way to make progress. She confessed to gripping the edges of her desk apprehensively as she softly encouraged Kay to share what she was experiencing. Miss Kay talked of the lady upstairs, a grumpy, unsociable old woman who was often mean to her. The lady would make Kay feel sad and afraid, like she was angry at Kay for being young and happy. At night, in Kay's dreams, the lady found a way to push through the floor in her apartment into Kay's bedroom. The girl had described it while she shook in the elementary school-sized chair, her eyes reliving what they had seen inside her subconscious. The old lady had been slowly pulling herself through the ceiling in an impossible way that only dreams could allow, reaching out and grasping with spindly fingers that, despite their appearance of frailty, gripped and pulled with the strength of a vice. Her long, matted hair obeyed gravity and hung down, but the rest of her did not. The girl could see where the lady's skin touched the wall. It slowly began to spread blackness through the wallpaper as if rotting it, inflecting it with mold. And there the old woman clung, slowly pulling herself downward towards Kay, as if fighting the seizing up of wretched, clicking bones to make contact. Of course, Miss Kay used childlike terms, but Amanda felt like she could see into the scene the girl's language painted for her. Dread and confusion filling in the gaps of the description with horrors born of Amanda's own deep fears and imagination. She had seen in her mind's eye the small girl frozen to her bed, weeping in terror as a filthy and decrepit mess of hair and cold skin pulled itself eagerly towards her from above, rotting the wall itself with the faintest touch. It was a glimpse into the madness that Miss Kay found herself in at such a young age. Struggling to keep herself composed, but ever the professional, Amanda talked Miss Kay through coping mechanisms and things she should try. Perhaps in the dream, if she could muster any kind of movement or speech, she should address the nightmarish vision of the lady upstairs and assert the facts, that it was a dream and that the lady wasn't real. Perhaps, outside of the nightmares, she could visit the real lady upstairs and try to have a polite conversation with her, recognizing that she was probably just a lonely old woman lashing out without realizing. Perhaps these things could help. Amanda felt she was clutching at straws, but this was more than just academic prowess. This was a tortured little girl's stability at stake. At that point, the session had come to an end. Amanda felt a small twinge of consolation that Miss K's demeanor seemed lighter than before. Perhaps just the act of recalling the events of her nightmare to someone else for the first time had gone some way to clearing the young girl's head. In fact, as the girl left, Amanda noted she had seen Kay smile for the first time since her sessions with Kay had begun. It was possible that now the girl felt armed with tools she could fight back with. Ever since the session, though, Amanda struggled to get the mental image of that horrendous thing to leave her. I spent that whole afternoon talking with her in the hall. I think I had a class I should have gone to, but that was the furthest thing from my mind. I did my best to reassure her that actually she'd probably helped more than she realized. Kay now had some defense mechanisms that might assist her in defeating those issues. The nightmares sounded awful, but they weren't Amanda's horrors. Miss Kay wasn't really a case for students, and that, all things considered, Amanda had coped pretty well. About 5, she headed off, but she thanked me and said she'd let me know how the case went. She seemed a lot more settled and even chuckled a little when she realized she didn't even know my name as she said goodbye. Pushing my luck a little more, I said I'd go one better and give her my number, too. She took the scrap of paper I wrote on it from me. I hoped it wouldn't find its way into the trash. She didn't call, but roughly a week or so later, she came up to me in the lunch hall with a rapturous smile painted all over her face. It occurred to me that I had never seen her genuinely excited before. Of course, it was cute. Miss K had just had what Amanda believed would be the last session at the university. There was a tremendous increase in her mood, and she reported that she had stopped suffering from the nightmare a few nights before. Kay stated, with visible enthusiasm and appreciation, that Amanda's idea had worked. Within her dreams, Miss Kay had watched the lady from upstairs manifest herself once more through the ceiling, and although as terrified as ever, Kay had felt inspired by Amanda's suggestions. She had whispered out, timidly at first, but soon gaining a defiant tone with each uttered word, until she claimed she was shouting wildly at the woman. "You're not real. Miss Morris said so," she had called out as loudly as she could. "Why don't you just move away? Bother someone else." Shortly afterward, Amanda received glowing praise from the department, clearly cementing her reputation as their star student with a promising future in the field. I wish I could say this is how the story came to an end, but if it were so, I would not be writing to you. Several days after, I finally got that phone call from Amanda, but it was not the one I had hoped for. I suppose at least my fears of her discarding my number were put to rest, but it was little comfort. She called me at around 4 a.m, with the sun only just beginning to threaten the coming of an early dawn sky. I answered in a daze, having been just wretched from sleep. The words were worried and rushed. Something about a dream, the lady upstairs, and Amanda had run from her room in halls. My mind fumbled like someone who wakes in the dark and must blindly collide with various pieces of furniture until they find a light switch. I asked her a few questions to ascertain exactly what had occurred. Amanda had been feeling unwell, so she had gone to bed around 10 and had just woken up screaming, bathed in sweat. She described what she had seen in her dream to me, the lady upstairs. In explicit detail, she told me how, through adult eyes, she had seen the terror that Miss Kay had spoken of. A lurching, hunched old woman with mottled skin had appeared to her. In the nightmare, she had been aware of a scraping wooden sound like the scratching of mice between floorboards above, and had turned her head to see fingertips with worn-away nails prise their impossible way through the ceiling. She stuttered through tears that the plaster had crumbled and fell onto her cheek, and despite it being a dream, she had felt it. Then she had seen a pair of eyes, not blank, twisted or demonic, but human. Eyes that were filled with the glee the hungriest of predators must reveal when they see a long-awaited meal. They were unyielding portals into a horror unimaginable. The lady upstairs had reached her long skeletal arms toward the uniform beige walls of Amanda's campus room and made contact with him. At her touch, small dark spores of mold had outstretched downwards as if guiding the way she would take. Fibrous and squelching, it spread oppressively along the wall. Amanda noted the whole atmosphere of the room felt damp and muggy as her breath caught in her chest, leaving only the sound of clicking arthritic bones, the clawing fingers, the arms, even the rib cage as it rattled with the lady upstairs' own breathing. She said it felt like the old woman was pulling her way out of some twisted place, far beyond the realms of our understanding, and with each inch she came closer, becoming more human, more alive. Amanda, at this point, was screaming within herself, but she could make no sound. As the lady came closer, it was all she could do but to try and concentrate and think. It's in her nature to have all the answers, I guess. She groped around her now blurry memories and came to the very same words Miss Kay had revered with some sort of magical power, and with conviction managed to quietly utter them. "You're not real. This is a dream, and you are not real." The words left her mouth, and she felt a slow, burning warmth in her chest, the fire of hope. The lady upstairs stopped moving immediately. Another log on that hopeful fire. "You aren't real," she exclaimed, louder this time. The static creature drew breath slowly and heavily. It began to make a rasping noise, and Amanda's heart leapt at how wounded that sound appeared to be. However, the hopeful fire inside was snuffed out in an instant as the rasping became slow, hacking laughter. The lady upstairs reached both hands out suddenly, stopping only a foot or two from the bed and Amanda. She pulled herself down the length, her swaying, bedraggled hair catching dimly in the moonlight the blinds cast across the wall, her face coming into view inches from Amanda's. The lady's hair hung downwards like a curtain, blocking and enclosing Amanda's view so their vision was locked on each other. Hungry eyes stared into the rabbit in the headlights that Amanda now knew herself to be. Cold, foul-smelling breath escaped the sneering, semi-living corpse of the woman as she opened her mouth to speak. Amanda was repulsed by a set of broken, decaying teeth that sat in what was now a blackened, jagged grin. "I am real." Amanda had woken, clutching her chest, hyperventilating and queasy. She had fled her campus room in an instant after hurriedly dressing, was now sat in the 24-hour library on campus talking to me because she was starting to lose it. It was unsettling in the least to hear of the dream itself. It conjured up frightening mental images that, frankly, I didn't need. However, this drew out the empathy in me. I didn't like it, but I wasn't the one who had to live it. So I listened. I comforted as best as I could, and tried to reassure her. We were all under a lot of pressure on the course, and Amanda had probably felt it much more recently due to the distressing nature of Miss Kay's case. I told her that she was shaken when Kay had initially described the nightmare, and maybe on a deeper level this was all still playing on her subconscious. She listened. She seemed to accept some of what I was saying, but still she sounded distant, like it didn't all add up, and she maybe already arrived at why. I offered to come over to the library, but she assured me it was okay. After the call, I took a shower to try and shake off the sleepiness, grabbed 2 coffees from a machine in the library's lobby, and made my way up to where she was anyway. She didn't sound okay to me. When I arrived, she wasn't there. I was met with an empty room, the only sound the low hum of artificial light and computers ticking over. I drank the coffees and messed around online for a while, but I couldn't really get either Amanda or the lady upstairs off my mind. Amanda was clearly experiencing the same kind of nightmare that Miss Kay did. I guessed it was psychosomatic. Sorry, you'll want layman's terms. Psychosomatic means experiencing physical symptoms, but those symptoms originate from mental or emotional causes. I thought maybe Amanda's dreams and subsequent elevated heartbeat, breathing, and anxiety were all being caused psychologically by her closeness to the upsetting case. The ideas of an animated cadaver emerging from above had been planted in her mind by Miss Kay. I tried to call her a few times throughout the day. She didn't answer. I left it at 4 calls. I thought that any more would put me in the stalker category. I guess, as she demonstrated at 4 a.m., if she needed me, she would get a hold of me. She never called. In fact, until this very day, I haven't seen or heard of her again. It's been about a week. What I've managed to piece together is that she conducted a home visit with Miss Kay after calling me that morning, a kind of follow-up appointment, essentially proving aftercare for the girl. I know a friend in the admin systems for our department who turned a blind eye for a few minutes, so I could get my hands on the case documents. She'd come back from that visit and logged it, a small description, simply stating, "The girl's nocturnal episodes have ceased largely due to the lady living above her moving." I took a printout of this with me, so I knew where to go. When I went to Miss Kay's address, I became at first confused, then very disturbed when I could find no floor but the apartment the young girl lived in. Through the same friend who allowed me access to the case files, I caught wind of an immediate transfer request to an unspecified university submitted by Amanda on the same day when she returned from the home visit. To be honest, I didn't understand, but I wanted to be able to. I kind of hope it wasn't me that caused her to leave, but I'm sure, as you know, it's not easy to shake that feeling that your advances, however well-intentioned, can cause apprehension and upset. When I went to the heads of department about her sudden disappearance and whether we should get the police involved, they shut me down. They were cold towards me, as their star student was getting out of town in a hurry, and I was the only person who had been seen with her recently. One lecturer implied rather unpleasantly that he had concerns I'd been stalking her, as I'd been seen on several occasions with her of late, and it was a well-known fact that Amanda didn't keep friends. I believe they hold me responsible, and there's not much I can do to dissuade that. Hell, you might as well think it too, spinning you a story of nightmares and strange old ladies that aren't really there. If you find her, talk to her. Let her know I'm desperate to know she's all right, that I figured out what was going on and I only want to help. If she doesn't want to know me, fine. I'll be cut up about it, but whatever she wants. All I really need you to do is just tell me that she's okay. I don't need to know where she is. No stalker would be satisfied with just that, but it would be enough for me. I know what's going on and I'm genuinely concerned. I boosted one of the skeleton keys the cleaners use when going through halls to fix up campus rooms, and got into Amanda's room yesterday. She left in a hurry, leaving a bit of a mess in her wake. Above her bed, though, was a rather large patch of dank, dark mold clinging to the wall. The clump ended in long, slender, outstretched drips, kind of like fingers. The lady upstairs is real, and she did move from Miss Kay to Miss Moore.
Chilling tales for dark nights.